Yeah. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Uvajjayanam, Namo Loe Savva Sahunam, Eso Pancha Namukkaro, Savva Pava Panasano, Mangaladam cha Savesam, Padamam Havai Mangalam, Namo Durvara Ragadi Vairivara Rivarine, Arhate Yoganathaya Mahaviraya Taine, Pannage cha Surendre cha, Kaushike Pada Sansprashe, Nirvishesha Manaskaya, Shri Veera Swamine Nama. So, right, so there were two alternatives that were posed. One was posed by Shreyans earlier, but he doesn't seem to have joined, and he seemed to suggest that we uh, just do a bunch of Q&As that have been pending or sitting in the group to be discussed during the Swadhyay session. And the other is that we resume with Panchasutra. So, which of the two alternatives do you guys want to go with? I'm okay with either, so just let me know and we'll proceed accordingly.
So in terms of recording, we are on track with Panch Sutra.
Okay, okay.
That would make sense if the sequence we maintain sequence.
If what, sorry?
If we maintain sequence in terms of video,
Right, right. No, that makes sense. Let me just, in that case, get the Granth. Allow me a minute, please. Okay, right, there we go. Uh, right. So, do we have the Manoj bhai, I think you had a copy of Panchasutra, right? On that you'd shared. Is it possible for you to perhaps put it on the screen?
Yeah, let me find it.
Thank you. So we're on the fourth sutra. No, you'll have to scroll further down.
Yeah, yeah. this is the end.
Oh yeah, so just if you can scroll upward to the fourth sutra.
कल मैं मीटिंग में हूँ मतिका.
No, a little upward. Uh, a No, sorry. Could you just so the gatha starts with, I think the last we stopped was this gatha called Payam Chinna Kammanu Bandhe. Oh, that's interesting. No, I think a few pages might be missing from the prat, or I might have overlooked them.
Okay.
In any case, okay. So now, the last I remember us discussing is is where we discussed a reference from the Agam Bhagavati Sutra, wherein Paramatma tells Gautam Swami Bhagwan that a sadhu Bhagwant who has practiced Diksha with the right bhav for a month's paryay feels a degree of happiness greater than that of Varnayantar Devtas, those of a paryay of 2 months uh, experience experience the sukh, which increases that of Bhavanpati Devtas, excluding Asur Kumar Devtas, and so on. And then we saw that a person, a sadhu Bhagwant, gradually speaking, who has completed 11 to 12 months of Diksha Paryay, experiences the sukh of the nine Graivik Devtas and the five Anuttar Devtas, respectively. Five Anuttar Devtas obviously are the highest category of Devtas. And this is to say that once a Mahatma follows the method listed out in the first, second, and third sutras and the fourth sutra, and practices Sanyam in the ways that it is supposed to, he experiences a sense of happiness that is so profound that even in terms of Paudgalic happiness, in terms of mental happiness, his happiness is far greater than that of Anuttarvasi Devtas. And we know that those who go to the Sarvart Siddhvaman, they are always Ekavatari, which means that in the next birth that they're definitely going to attain moksha. And yet, a Muni who might be actually far from attaining moksha in that very birth might still experience a degree of happiness that is greater than that of Anuttarvasi Devtas. So it's quite interesting. One might wonder, let's take the example of uh, Abhay Kumar Mantri, for instance, who after listening, the son of Shrenik Maharaja, who after listening to Paramatma is so, desperate to take Diksha that upon uh, taking Diksha, he practices it so beautifully that he goes to the Anuttar Viman, he goes to the Sarvat Siddh Viman as a Dev, from after which he'll attain moksha in the next birth. So the interesting thing is to understand that karma is also so complex that a Mahatma like him, while he was on here, was experiencing a degree of happiness that is than that greater than that degree which he would have perhaps experienced after his Kal Dharma too as a Dev. And remember that the sukh of the Dev who's in the Anuttar Devlok is only second to that of Mahapurush, like in terms of prosperity, of course, in terms of Mahapurush like Tirthankar Bhagwans and Gandhar Bhagwans. It is greater than everyone else in this world. And yet, an ordinary Mahatma who is endowed with Darshan Yan Charitra and who's practiced Sanyam for just a year experiences happiness greater than them. So one really wonders what is this hidden tattva that the Muni is drawing its happiness from as a Sadhu Bhagwant. And then the Panchasutrakar he proceeds to describe what kind of Sadhu Bhagwant is a yogi. Very limited words, just two lines, and he describes the nature of such Sadhu Bhagwant. He says, Payam Chinna Kammanu Bandhe, Khavai Loga Sannam, Padisoa Gami, Anusoa Nivitte, Saya Suhajoge, Esa Jogi Vyahiye. He gives multiple adjectives. The first is Payam Chinna Kammanu Bandhe. Prayash Chinna Karmanu Bandha. A Sadhu Bhagwant who practices his Sanyam in accordance with Janagya. And Janagya here is the steps laid down in the Panchasutra, right from the first sutra where we sort of try to destroy the seed, the root of all pap, and try to sow within ourselves the the seeds of virtues, and hence the sutra Pap Pratighat Guna Bijadhan Sutra. To understanding what dharma is, practicing it, to nurturing a desire to take diksha, obtaining permission or not, and taking it, and then practicing it in the manner listed out in the fourth sutra. This yogi purush is someone whose anubandh of karma has now become has now almost died. So he's almost obliterated the anubandh of his karma. That is the first adjective. That is, there might he still has karma on him, but when there is the uday of those karmas, in the udaik kal of those karmas, he will usually, and hence the word prayah, that is mostly, he will mostly not do bandh of new karmas, right? And the just to draw a parallel, Smith Bhai was home about 15-20 minutes ago, and during the Chaitya we were singing this Tavan, uh, which I shared earlier on the group yesterday, Shri Jana Raja Jagat Hitagari, Murati Mohana Gari Re, wherein Paramatma's life before Diksha is, described. And there's a beautiful gatha which says, uh, Bhoga Karama Fada Roga Tani Pare, Bhogave Roga Nivari Re. Uh, I do not recollect the second gatha. This is the second line which I'm looking at. Uh, oh yeah, it says Paravada Pade Parebaya Rangadhare Panantara Vikari Re. And so Paramatma's Grohastha Jivan, Paramatma's life as a householder, is described in the exact same manner that we see here. Prayash Chinna Karmanu Bandha. There is prior no new karma bandh that is happening even in the face of uday of karmas. That is when Bhagwan, because of his nikachit karma, has to engage in worldly pleasures. And for certain Tirthankar Paramatmas, in fact, the majority of Tirthankar Bhagwans in this Chovisi uh, came with such nikachit karma that forced them to marry. Certain Tirthankar Bhagwans like Shantinath, Kuntunath, and Darnath Bhagwan came with a sort of nikachit karma that compelled them to enjoy the status and padvi of a Chakravarti along with that of a Tirthankar. So, in the face of all of these, they obviously had to, enjoy the worldly pleasures that that their previous karma got for them. And in doing all of that, even as Sadhu Bhagwan Sir, as Vitarag Paramatma, we understand that Paramatma has no Rag and Dvesh. But even as householders, even when they led their lives as householders, we see the kind of sthit pragyata, that is their buddhi, their mental alignment was so equalized that they would not be inclined or disinclined towards any shubh or ashubh, Paudgalic bhav. And thus, even when they got the highest degree of, materialistic comforts, for Tirthankar Bhagwans did not get anything that is cheap, even in worldly terms. Even when they got that, uh, Paramatma's dasha is described so beautifully that the scriptures say that coral stone might appear red, but it's actually devoid of color. It's only from the outside that that it appears red. Similarly, Paramatma, he essentially puts on a show to in every aspect of life. Even when he's with his parents, he will do all he will execute all auchitya that is needed to be executed. He'll look after everyone, look after his subjects if need be, if he's a king, that is. And in doing all of that, from within, he's so udasin, so disinterested, and so, disinclined towards all of this that there is not even a tiny vikar present in Paramatma. And yet, there are raga and dvesh that are present in Paramatma. The point I'm trying to make is that Tirthankar Bhagwans, even from the time of their conception in the womb, they have attained such a beautiful antardasha that uh, we hear of how Indra Maharaja, all 64 Indras start worshipping Paramatma right from the time of Chavan Kalyanak. It's because that all these adjectives that you're going to discuss now uh, are more or less applicable for Tirthankar Bhagwans at the time of them being householders. And this is not in any purpose intended to mean that we should also try to imitate them, because that is not the mark for us. On the other hand, this is also to shed some light uh, in on our discussion from earlier, wherein we were looking at why we do not celebrate the birthdays of Gandhar Bhagwans or anyone else, and only Tirthankar Bhagwans. But really speaking, their life is the answer. We do not see such sort of disconnect and detachment in anyone else but Tirthankar Bhagwans. And thus, even their Auchitya Palan as householders, or their Sthit Pragya Buddhi as householders, or the way they would do Vinay of their parents, etc., all of this is exemplary for us, right? And the Tikakar Bhagwans here specifies that such Sadhu Bhagwans uh, also know that sometimes uh, you know the power of karma is also infinite, and sometimes you can't imagine to what degree karma can harass you, and because of that sometimes they might also end up binding new karma, hence the word praya is used. Then it says khavai loga sannam. This is extremely important, and this also lays down the mark for all of us to follow as members of the Chaturved Sangh. uh, so here by saying uh, Khavai Loga Sannam, which is in Sanskrit, Kshapayati Loka Sanyam. Sadhu Bhagwans have now gotten rid of Lok Sanya, the mentality that, the society is saying X, so I should also do X. I should not go against X. Here the Tikakar Bhagwan specifies that uh, Lok Sanya is the opposite of Bhagwan's Vachan. So if you look at it the other way, Bhagwan's Vachan, the word of Tirthankar Bhagwans, is the opposite, it's the antithesis of Lok Sanya, which is to say that Dharma is always going to be contrary to what the majority of society thinks, contrary to what public opinion is, contrary to what, majoritarian beliefs in the society are. Knowing this, the Mahatma gets rid of Lok Sanya. Further, Lok Sanya is also Lok Sanya is essentially the essentially, well, in Latin we call it vox populi, the voice of the people. Here, Haribhadra Sureshwarji Maharaja describes it in a very simple way. He says that the yogi sadhu Bhagwant knows that this Lok Sanya, this opinion of the people, is in fact reflective of the attitudes and interests of those Bhavabhinandi Jeev who roam in the sansar. Bhavabhinandi Jeev are essentially those Jeev who are inclined towards the sansar and not towards moksha. Because what really is Lok Sangya apart from that? You pick up any, majority opinion on most things today. All things are essentially reflective of their inclination towards the sansar in one way or the other. The Shastrakar Bhagwan and discussed this before, they draw a very nice line between Lok Virudh Tyag and Lok Sangya Tyag. So that which is Lok Virudh, that is that which is, you know, uh, contrary to social norms. And here in social norms, we're talking about social norms that are accepted by wiser people. Those norms are also essential for us to follow, such as, certain social norms, such as of if the king of a particular place is uh, visiting, or you have an occasion to go to the king, then you must act with decorum, you must act appropriately. You shouldn't make a mess out of yourself, basically. When you're dealing with people from the state, you should be careful. And also, say there's a dispute between two people and one of them happens to be a relative or a friend, you should side with the truth and not with those, not with X person because he's your relative or friend. All of these are social norms, and obviously they're connected to dharma in many ways. Sometimes they're not, but yet we follow these social norms because lok virudh tyag is important for us. We shouldn't practice dharma in a way that, the society starts to think that this dharma is not uh, it can't be, it's not practically possible to sort of internalize it in the current state of the society. But at the same time, one also has to ensure that they do tyag of lok sanya. So while both words might seem like the same thing, there's a wide difference between the two, which is why uh, in Gyan Sar there is an entire ashtak, an entire set of 8 gathas that has been blocked by Mahamohopadhyay Shri Ashwajari Maharaja. In the very first gatha of Lok Sanya Tyag Ashtak, it also opens with such a beautiful way. He says, Praptha Shashtam Gunasthanam Bhava Durgadri Langhanam Loka Sanya Rato na Syan Munir Lokottara Sthiti. He asks the Muni Bhagwant, O Muniraj, do you know who you are? If you actually, and this is a reminder to all Muni Bhagwans out there, and by that also to us, because if we look at most of our scriptures, they are directed towards Sadhu Bhagwans, and in doing that, whatever Updesh is applicable for us, we need to apply that for our own selves. So Upadari Bhagwant, he asks Muni Bhagwans, to look within and figure out the answer to the question, do you know who you are? If you actually try to figure out your identity, you will not have any interest in Lok Sangya. And he says, look, this is what your sthiti is. Praptah Shashtam Gunasthanam Bhava Durgadri Langhanam Munir Lokottara Sthiti. And then the third pad is Loka Sangya Ratona Syad. He says, O Muni Bhagwant, you have attained the sixth Gunasthanak. What is the sixth Gunasthanak like? Bhava Durgadri Langhanam. He says that this sixth Gunasthanak is much higher than you think. You might think that there are 14 Gunasthanakas, and as such, the sixth Gunasthanak isn't even half of the 14 steps. But he says that you're being mistaken, because Bhava Durgadri Langhanam essentially means that you have crossed over the mighty fortress of the Sansar. The real battle to fight is not after the sixth Gunasthanak, but rather the one before. Because right from the first Gunasthanak, as Mand Mithya Drashtis, it is so difficult to get rid of, the sanyas that we have internalized: Ahar Sanya, Bhay Sanya, Maithun Sanya, and Parigra Sanya. And all of these sanyas, they, as householders, we might not realize it as often. But when you have taken Diksha and when you're practicing Sadhu Dharma, you have to be on guard to defend yourselves, against all these four sanyas at every wakeful moment, or in fact, even when you're asleep, for that matter, every moment of your life. So, uh, he sort of, reminds the Muni Bhagwans that by having ascended the sixth Gunasthanak, you are now, you have now, crossed over the fortress of the Sansar. And thus, the path that you're on is a Lokottar path. So why do you, as a, oh Muni, why do you care for Lok Sangya? Please get rid of it. And he goes on. Uh, we've all heard of the famous, stories as kids where there's a foolish Brahmin who's going somewhere, and these group of thieves, they trick him into believing that his goat is really a dog, uh, and they essentially trade it away, and they deceive him. On similar on similar lines here, Yashojiri Maharaja says that just like a foolish person gives away his Chintamani Ratna, the Ratna which can, grant everything that you wished for, in return for mere fruits of the bare tree. Similarly, O foolish sadhu, uh, only a foolish sadhu or a foolish person will leave dharma to care for what the care for what the public opinion is, to care for what people say. So here the Tikakar Bhagwan says that, and this is also again mentioned in Gyansar itself. The Tikakar Bhagwan says that the Sadhu Bhagwan is walking against the current. The current in the river of public opinion flows one way, and the sadhu has to do the mighty task of crossing the river while walking against the current. And we all know by practical experience how difficult that is. It's not, in fact, it's almost impractical to do that, and which is why the task of a sadhu bhagwan is more difficult than anything else. Which is why again in the Stavan of Anantanath Bhagwan, the 14th Tirthankar Paramatma, Anand Ganji Maharaja, very clearly at the very outset, he, makes it extremely clear for us. Dharat alavarani sohili, dohili chaudama jinatani charana seva. It is easier to walk on the edge of a sword than it is to serve the 14th Tirthankar. And the 14th Tirthankar is just because the dedication of the Stavan is to the 14th Tirthankar. But he says that it is easier to walk on a sword, or, to do something that is as painful, but it is in fact more painful, more difficult, more, burdensome to serve the Tirthankar Bhagwant uh, as per his Agya. This is Pratipatti Puja, the highest form of puja. Anyway, so in the in the Panchasutra, the Sadhu Bhagwan is described as one who's walking against the force, the current of Lok Sangya, and thus he practices those dharmic achars which are exactly opposite to the achars of the society, and you will find this in every conduct of a Sadhu Bhagwan. So and then it further says that this sadhu is always endowed with the achars of his monkhood. And these sadhus are the sadhus that are described as yogis by Paramatma. The Tikakar Bhagavan again sums it up. Samyakta Jnana Charitra Yoga Sad Yoga Uchyate Etad Yogi Syat Parama Brahma Sadhaka. In the scriptures, your connection with Samyak Darshan, your connection with Samyak Gyan, and your connection with Samyak Charitra has been called as Yog. Yojanad Yoga, or in other words, uh, that which connects you with moksha, that is known as yog. And obviously here it is the Ratnatrayi, because we know that Samyak Darshan Jnana Charitadi Moksha Margaha. So your our connection with these three Ratnatrayi is yog, and a person who practices such yog is essentially a yogi. Again, the aim of this yogi is only one: Parama Brahma Sadhakaha. This yogi Purush is the sadhak of the Param Brahma Tattva, that is of the Siddhapad. And then, even if he does not attain moksha in that very birth, he creates a chain of punyanu punya which will give him moksha very soon. This is highlighted in the last part of the sutra, wherein it says, "Esa arahage samanasa jaha gahiya paine savvo vaha suddhe sandhai suddhagam bhavam sammam abhava sahagam bhoga kiriya suruvai kappam तवो ता संपूर्ण पावणई अविगल हेउ भावो असंख्य लिट्ठ सुहरुआओ अपरोवताविणो सुंदरा अणुबंधेणम नय अण्णा संपूर्ण तत्त खंडनेण. Such a sadhu attains sadhutva because the way he took the pratigya several days, months, or years ago, he remembers that every day in his life, and in accordance with that pratigya, the pratigya being the Karimi Bhante Sutra that they take, in accordance with that pratigya, remembering that, oh, I have taken Pachakhan of all Savadhya Yoga, of all sinful activities, in terms of doing it, getting it done, and doing Anubandha of those who do it, and from Manvachan and Kaya. So in these nine types of all Savadhya Kriya, I have completely abstained from. I have further taken the onus of the five Mahavrats upon my shoulders. So I am going to live every single day trying to discharge them to the best of my ability. And because the goal is very clear, because the vision is very clear, without any atichar in his vrat, his all the essential qualities that are necessary for Sayyam, for his charitra, they become more and more refined. And this sadhu, by doing the satkriya that he's supposed to do, uh, he finally attains a bhav, a birth, wherein he's endowed with, obviously the basics such as a very beautiful body, a very beautiful, family, a very beautiful and comfortable life, etc. But more importantly, this punya rewards him in a way that it guarantees that he's going to attain, moksha in the next birth, if not in this birth. And by doing dharma sadhana, gradually he attains this final birth, wherein, you know, apart from all the materialistic pleasures, he also gets all the spiritually helpful pleasures, such spiritually helpful, elements of punya, which includes, getting Sadguru Bhagwant, getting the opportunity to listen to them, getting the requisite bhav to practice what Guru Bhagwants are saying, and finally having the strength to act on it by practicing charitra. Except this grade of charitra is going to be one that has never been attained before. And then the Swarup of this Mahatma's Gyan is mentioned. Ayam Nananti Vuchaye. Ayam me Suhajoga Siddhi Uchiya Padivatti Pahana. In this manner, once a Muni Bhagwant understands, now we go back to the first sutra, wherein we saw the Swarup of the Sansar. Uh, just reminding you of the first sutra, when it was said by Paramatma, Dukkha Ruve Dukkha Phale Dukkhanu Bandhe. This Sansar is Dukh Roop, Dukh Falak, and Dukkhanu Bandhi. And so Sukh is in all places except for this. Except for this, there's only one place, and that is within ourselves. And so the Muni Bhagwant knows that true Sukh is within. And this Gyan is not something that he's just learnt because of Guru Parampara. At this point, he has also started feeling it, because he also saw right from day one, as he ascends higher and higher conducts or higher and higher grades of Charitra, he is able to, experience higher and higher Sukh. Which is why it is often said, during the Navpad pravachans, during both Navpad Olis, that on the second day of Navpad Oli, where we do Aradhana of Siddha Bhagwans, uh, that after describing everything, there is going to be a limit to, how much you can elaborate on the happiness, on the bliss of that Siddha Bhagwans enjoy. The most you can do for uh, a preliminary understanding is to apply the rule of negative elimination, which in the scriptures is described as neti neti. Neti is na plus iti. So not this, not this, not this. When you do a negative elimination is, in this manner, for all things belonging or not belonging to the sansar, you are left with one alternative, and that is the Chetna Tattva. And by negative elimination, you realize that, oh, truly happiness has to be within.
Parshva, you are muted. I'm not sure if it was accidental or purpose.
Oh, sorry. How long has this been
So
the
I
case?
think you covered the talked about the Neti part that and everything is only Chetna Tattva is the this thing, and then it got muted
Oh,
after that.
Michhami Dukadam, Michhami Dukadam.
That
Uh,
was a minute ago.
so, right. So here the Panchasutakar Bhagwant is also saying that, by knowing one, you know all, and by knowing all, you know one. And thus, this Muni Bhagwant has attained the knowledge of the Swarup of what is Isht for him. Here it is, obviously everyone wants happiness, everyone wants Sukh. This Sadhu Bhagwant has understood and internalized the actual Swarup of Sukh, and thus his Gyan is that which is actually Paramarthik Gyan. It is actual Gyan. What we perhaps have has not translated to Gyan in a way that is acceptable to, Shastrakar Bhagwans. Even if we know a little, the little that we know is not knowledge according to them. Because here, it is very clearly said that this Gyan that they have is Paramarthik Gyan. Once they attain such Gyan, in this life and the next life, they only engage in the pursuit of that which they know. And because of their Shubh Vyapar, they are able to realize the goal that they have set for themselves. That is attaining the Ishtavastu, that is attaining Avyabad Sukh. And thus, uh, towards the end, it also says a Jnani Bhagwant does not do any such activity, does not initiate any such activity that can destroy the welfare of his own Atma. In saying this, the Sutrakar Bhagwant just gives three words in the next sutra. He says, Itha Bhavo Pavattago. Atra Bhavaha Pravartakaha. That so he says that okay, look, we've discussed all of these activities that a sadhu is supposed to do. He should do this, he should do that, he should not fall prey to lok sangya. Why what is the reason that he's engaging in this? What is the driving force for him? So here, the Panchasutakar Bhagwan says that the pravartak or the driving force here is the Shubh Bhav of the Mahatma, not Moha. Because Moha is a force that will always make you act, always make you do anuchit things. It will make you do things that are inappropriate and which will, jeopardize your welfare. But if you are looking at the result, and the result is that you are able to attain spiritual welfare, surely the driving force is your Shubh Bhav. And your Shubh Bhav is also not your own, fantasized Shubh Bhav, but Shubh Bhav in accordance with Paramatma's Agya. So just three words, but a lot of clarification to understand. Uh, in a lot of things that we think are good or appropriate, be it for as a sadhu, Shravaks or for sadhu bhagwans, we need to examine from time to time whether the driving force here is my own moha or is it Paramatma's agya. To give you a simple, example, a few days ago, there was a very, there was a very new statement. It's not new, but something that came about to be heard after a very long time. And the discussion was going on in the Sangh, wherein it was mentioned that uh, oh look, Shravaks are anyway entitled to do dravya stuff. That is, they're supposed to do dravya puja of Paramatma. And this is because they are sitting in the sansar, so they do hinsa anyway. So they might as well do hinsa of Paramatma. As well, loosely put, uh, l- essentially engage in Swarup hinsa to attain to do bhakti of Paramatma. And discussions on these lines are going on. And at one point in time, certain Mahatmas, uh, they opened, and obviously there were certain Shravaks who agreed to this, that instead of doing these Mahapujas wherein you get a lot of flowers to decorate the entire Janalaya, why not just limit it to doing Angi of Paramatma alone? and because the vidhan is to do jin puja, not decorate the jinalaya. Obviously, there are shastriya vidhans for that as well, but surely they wouldn't have considered these. And then instead of using uh, so much milk for Abhishek. We're not saying don't use milk, but maybe use not as much milk, because you just want to do puja and get rid of your karma anyway. So basically use so much milk when you can get the job done, and the job here being to do Shuddhi of Jin Pratima, and thus of your own Atma, uh, by using limited milk. And that is when you come across grunts like Jin Bhakti Dvatranchika Vipajaji Bhagwant, wherein he so beautifully puts across this concept of the same thing that we're seeing right now, to ascertain whether the pravruti that you are doing at a particular point in time, is it something that is moha janit, or is it something that you are doing out of your own vivek. And vivek obviously comes keeping in mind what Janagya is. So, a very uh, obviously the discussion that follows is great, and it's covered very well in Jinpati Dvatranchika. The point being, there being, just for our information, that excessive dravya at our stage always leads to excessive bhav. In some cases, if excessive dravya does not lead to an an excess of bhav or bhav vriddhi, then it is that person's ayogyata, and not of the anushthan that he's doing. Because this is also anubhav gamya, and we have various evidences acceptable in Indian philosophy. One evidence that everyone, even Gnostics, the Gnostic school, I mean, accepts is pratyaksh praman, is to believe that which is palpable, tangible, apparent to the senses, as pratyaksh, and as something that is truthful. So we experience this by pratyaksh praman, by anubhav, that an increase in dravya bhakti is definitely going to lead to an increase in bhav. And so this is of course very well discussed in the scriptures, and these are things that we should also be aware of, because day in and day out, such conversation, such dialogue is going to increase. And as giants, we need to know and be aware of what Jinagnya here is. Wherein a householder says that, oh, I am limiting the water that I'm using for bathing to, say, only two cups of water. So even for Paramatma's puja, I'm going to limit it to only this much. Now this sankoch, this limitation that he's exercising in terms of the dravya that he's using for Paramatma, or say, I remember very clearly an example of now this I remember hearing this in a lecture by a certain person who heads SRMD, wherein the concept of Jin Puja was discussed, in terms of it being Savadya or it being Nirvadya. And the person, obviously, because he follows Srimad Rajchandra, and this person in turn, Srimad Rajchandra, is followed by several schools of Jains. People were curious to know what his opinions were on Jin Puja. And of course, he suggested that Jin Puja, particularly in terms of Pushpa Puja, is totally something worth doing, and Shravak should do it. Now, an interesting question that popped up is, it was a tithi like Chaudas, and a person asked, "Oh, I'm not eating Lilotri today, or should I do puja? Should I do Pushpa Puja regardless?" It was an Aparvatithi, and this Shravak asked if I should do Jin Puja regardless, and wherein Srimad Rajchandra answered by saying, "Oh, you should, if need be, you can reduce one vegetable for your own consumption and offer, Pushpa to Paramatma instead," which kind of shows sankoch here, which is, by saying that, oh, if you were to not reduce your consumption, perhaps perhaps the material, the resources that you are dedicating to Paramatma should also be reduced. But I would suggest that you instead reduce your consumption and increase that. Now, this is also not the right way of prarupna, because no matter even if a Shravak is doing, IM bills back to back, or if he's doing Upvas for 6 months, and he's in and he hasn't taken Paushad, but he's given up every other Aram Samaram, he is required to do puja until he reaches that bhumika of a Shravak, wherein he does not even have to do puja. So the sankoch, or the limitation that is exercised often by Mahatmas from the part, or by Shravaks, by saying why do so much when you can get the job done in this much, is also a pravriti that is moha janit, and one has to be really really careful while doing it, because while doing any such activity and while taking guidance from such people, because bhav stav, that is bhav puja, uh, is essentially the immediate steps that you take to completely uproot moha. And when a Shravak does Dravya stuff, he does it with a very solid intention in mind. When will I do Bhavast? When will I become Adhikari of complete Bhavastav? And complete Bhavastav obviously can only be attained once you take Diksha, because that is the only way you can practice Paramatma's Agya to, a total degree. So in doing that, when he has this resolution in his mind, when he has this solid intention in his mind, he knows that the Dravya Puja also that I have to do has to be such that it leads to maximization of my bhav. And in doing that, the more resources that I pool in, it is going to be better for me to get rid A of my mamta, and for wealth in general, B for in case of food, in case of flowers, etc. In that case, mamta for various sensual pleasures, and C, in getting rid of all of these, I want to build a prashastrag towards Paramatma and Paramatma's Nav Tattva, Paramatma's Dharma Tattva, and thereby cultivate the strength to practice Bhavastav. So, point being that one has to be careful that the pravriti that they're doing is one that is, like in this case, induced by Shubh Bhav, Jinagnanusari Bhav. Right? So those were 3 words, but well, there's a lot to think even in those 3 words. And here, the Sutrakar Bhagavan then says, Payam Vighona Vijay Niranu Bandha Suha Kamma Bhavena. Because the driving force here is Shubh Bhav, there is usually no Vigna, there is no hindrance that comes in the way. Essentially saying that we hear of the adage Shreyansi Bahu Vignani. When you do a good job, there are a lot of vignas come in your way. And when you want to do pap, it's usually easier to do it. Here it is the exact opposite is said. Because the Mahatma here says that all the Ashubh karmas that he has, the Muni Bhagwant has here, are without any sort of Anubandh, which we saw just a few minutes ago. And because of that, well, to sum it up, the driving force here is Shubh Bhav. The reason of that is that the Anubandh of all Pap karmas has been ended. The third is that because of all of these Ashubh Karmadubandh having ended, the Mahatmas now find the Shubh Upay to progress. And because of that, the conclusion is that usually there is no Vigna that comes their way. There could be exceptions, such as in context of Megh Kumar. I'm sure everyone has heard the story. Megh Kumar was, well, we've heard of how he was an elephant in the previous 2 births, and in the penultimate birth, he tried to protect a rabbit in a forest fire by keeping his foot raised for 3 whole days, after which all of his body completely got very stiff and he couldn't move further, and he fell to the ground. His Ayushya ended, and he was born as the prince of Magadhadipati Shri Srenik Maharaja. And he hears Paramatma's Deshna because of his Tatha Bhavyatva and his Bhadrik Swabhav. He takes Diksha on the very first in the very first instance. Paramatma asks him to wait even, but he does not want to wait. Paramatma also sees that his Bhavitavyata is that he is going to take Diksha, and so Bhagwan gives him Diksha too. The very first day, this prince who has been you know who has been brought up in the most comfortable, most luxurious environment, is made to do Santhara near the door of the Upashraya, right? Because obviously, as Nutan Dikshit as Sadhu Bhagwans who live under the Anushasan of Acharya Bhagwans, Gandhar Bhagwans, etc., there is no scope for you to dictate terms as to where you'll sleep or where you'll wake up or when you'll sleep and when you'll wake up. And so he's allocated that place, and he lies down uh, on his santhara. It's his first night. He's never practiced anything before of the sort. No samayik, no paushad even to practice sadhu dharma. Just a surge in bhav, and he takes diksha. And well, post sunset, Mahatmas are stepping in and out of the Vasti to, relieve themselves, to attend to nature's call. And uh, in doing that, because he's right there at the door, there's a lot of dust gathered at the doorstep, obviously from the foot of the feet of Sadhu Bhagwans walking here and there. And it's getting all, he can feel it. We've all heard of the story of the princess and the pea, wherein there's a princess who's lost, who's lost her kingdom, and she's lost her way, and she goes to a person's place, and she says, "Oh, I'm a princess." The family does not believe them, so they place a tiny pea and they layer it with dozens and dozens of bed sheets, and she's made to sleep on top of them. And she's asked the next morning, "How did you sleep?" And the princess says, "Oh, I couldn't sleep properly at all because there was, the bed wasn't evenly made." And that's how they figured out that this person was a prince or princess. Point again being that he was accustomed to sleeping in the most in the softest beddings and bed sheets, and this obviously wasn't uh, something that he was comfortable with. And so he started having Ashubh Bhav, uh, not disrespect towards Mahatmas, but as to how he would practice this Sayam Dharma. And he thought that, oh, I should probably leave this and go back to my kingdom, because this is very difficult and I can't even sleep one day. This is only my first day. How will I go on like this for the rest of my life? And somehow he manages to pull through the night all awake. And in the next morning, he's decided that the next morning I'll go to Paramatma in the Samavasaran and tell Bhagwan that Bhagwan, I am returning your Rajoharan and Mohapatti, and this Vesh, I really cannot stay here any longer and I must go. And when he goes to say this to Paramatma, and this is a brilliant example of the eightfold darshanachar that we are supposed to practice as Shravaks. One of the forms of darshanachar is sthirikaran, to ensure that your sadharmic brother or sister has become stable in dharma. If they have any grievances, if they have any complaints, or if they're feeling unsettled in any new dharmic activity, or in dharma in general, they are able to attain they're able to attain stability in that practice. Forget Shravaks and Sadhu Bhagwans practicing it, even Tirthankar Bhagwans themselves practice this eightfold darshanachar. Firstly, it is a matter of immense pride for us that the Panchachar that we practice, it might not be of the level that Tirthankar Bhagwans practice, and it should not be of the level that Tirthankar Bhagwans practice. But the fact that we as Jains have been taught to practice this Panchachar, and with the help of Acharya Bhagwans who are known to engage people in the Panchachar, because of Tirthankar Bhagwans and Acharya Bhagwans, we've got this beautiful framework from the very beginning, which has not only been preached by Tirthankar Bhagwans but also practiced by them in their final birth as Tirthankar Bhagwans. So it's not a matter of ordinary pride at all. Right? So so here Megh Kumar Muni has obviously got Tirthankar Bhagwans himself as someone who's going to do Sthirikaran. We might not be so lucky, but we're no less luckier, because even today we have, ample opportunity to, to become Sthiran Dharma by the grace of Guru Bhagwan and Kalyan Mitras. Megh Kumar Muni goes to Paramatma, and Paramatma says, "Oh Megh, you should be the happiest person on earth, because all the three worlds bow down to the feet of a sadhu who has been who has been initiated today, and all of these Mahatmas are Gitarth Muni Bhagwans. It should be a source of sukh for you to be able to touch the dust of their feet." And starting from this, Paramatma gives a brilliant updesh. He says that, "You think this is uncomfortable for you? May I remind you of the discomfort that you have experienced in your previous birth only to extend Abhaydan to one rabbit. And Paramatma narrates his previous birth, Megh Kumar's previous birth to the Muni Bhagwant. And he says that, look, if you could do so much for a Panchendra Jeev at that point in time, and as a result of that, you got this birth and you came up until this point, surely you can practice this sadhu dharma, which is in the form of extending Abhaydan to every single Jeev in the 14 Rajlok and attain happiness which you will never attain otherwise in this world. And the words that we see in the scriptures that Bhagwan has used to, give comfort to Megan, remind him that this is the right path, he's on track and he shouldn't deviate. The words are also brilliant. uh and so in some exceptional cases like the case of Megh Kumar Muni, they might have Vignas in their way. Similarly, if you look at Nandi Shen Muni, there's also there's also a similar story there wherein where he's off track for 12 years and then he comes back on track. So barring such exceptions, which are few in number, a Muni who's working on this path will not have Vignas come his way. And then the Sutrakar Bhagwan says, Akhitau ime joga bhavarahanavatah tau sammam pavattai nipphayai anaole. See, because of Bahuman towards Diksha, because of Bahuman towards the moksha mark that Paramatma has shown in the previous birth, in this birth, surely this Muni has accepted all the activities of a Sadhu Bhagwant. And this acceptance of activities of Charitra, they construct for you a better grade of Charitra in the future, because of which the sadhu keeps on acting relentlessly in his samyak activities, and because of that, he finally is able to attain the pararth sadhana of his Shubh Kriyas. What is this pararth sadhana? He mentions that a sadhu bhagwant who is always working towards the welfare of his own self and that of the others, he is always endowed with strength, virya, that is constantly increasing. He's constantly on the go to his disposition has become like that. He's basically become Pararth Vyasni. He's become addicted to helping other people. In every Anushtan he does, there is no Atichar like we saw earlier. And because of that, he realizes that this dharma, and he repeats all the adjectives that were, given before, that this dharma is like uh, is like a doctor to cure the disease of rag. It is like water to cure to cool down the fires of dvesh. And this diksha is the means to attain an end to the rag and dvesh. And in doing that, he keeps on doing parat sadhana, because of which in his last bhav he becomes free of raj and mal. Raj is the karmas that are the bandh of which is ongoing. Mal is the karmas that have been attained previously. Well, both Raj and Mal literally mean dust and dirt, respectively. Here it is referred in a metaphorical sense. So the ongoing karmas and the previous karmas, he gets rid of all of them. He becomes Siddh, he becomes Buddh, he becomes Mukt, he attains Parinirvan. That is, he becomes free of karmas from all four sides, because of which he finally attains an end to all of his all of his karmas and all of his suffering. Here in the Tika, the Shashya asks that from the Nishchayanay, the Atma is anyway Siddh, Buddh, Mukta, and Parinirvat. So why are you saying that he becomes Siddh here? So the Tikakar Bhagavan the Guru Bhagavan in the Tika just clarifies that what you are saying is according to the Nishchayanay, but according to the Vyavharne, the Atma had still up until this point not become Siddh, etc. And so uh, just to combat Ekant Nishchay, this has been said, and that's how the fourth sutra ends. We'll just listen to the last gatha. It says, Tatha Kauna Niravasesam Kicham Vyuho Rayamale Sijjai Bujjai Muchai Parinivai Savva Dukkanamantam Karei. And with this, we come to an end of the fourth sutra of Sri Panchasutra. The last sutra now remains, and this last sutra of the Panchasutra is one that really requires a lot of thinking, a lot of discussion, like we saw earlier. Because in the very beginning, we'll see that, uh, when the Granthkar Bhagwan starts describing the nature of Siddha Bhagwans, he very clearly says, Sena Saddena Ruvena Gandhena Rasena Fase. Siddha Bhagwans do not have sparsh, they do not have roop, nor do they have gandh, ras, or sparsh. So the question is, what do they have? And in discussing what do they have, there's a lot of questions that are raised as to, uh, the ones that we saw earlier, that if the Atma was always Siddh, if the Atma was always Mukt, if the Atma was always Buddha, and if the Atma was always Parinirvat, then at what point in time did the Atma become, did the Atma become a Siddh, a Buddh, a Mukt, and when did it become bound by all karmas? So a lot of, existential questions are also raised in this, and in doing that, Haribhadra Sureshwari Maharaja in the Tika, he also, makes references to contemporary Buddhist texts to figure out what they say, where they are, where there are shortcomings, and all of those things. So surely that will require some more time. Although the fifth sutra is relatively much shorter than the fourth sutra. The fourth sutra is perhaps the longest one, include the Tika included. So we'll look at that the next time. Well, in context of the Buddhist references made there, if we want to, dabble a little more deeper, we can do that. We'll have to draw references from other parallel grunts to do that, though, because obviously in one grunt you will find you'll find things only concerning the immediate point. In other grunts, you might find more on related propositions. So we can also do that. Uh, it's important to understand while doing that 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 our own Shastrakar Bhagwans, clarify that after the Jain darshan, the Bauddha darshan, the Buddhist faith, is the next most complex faith in terms of its logic. And so a person who, tries to venture into that faith, and if they do not have if they do not have samyak both of the Jain Shastras, they are very likely to, go on a slippery slope and not recover. Uh, Obviously, this is not to say that one shouldn't study the Buddhist faith, but that is obviously provided one has ample knowledge of Swadarshan too. Uh, it's also important to remember at this point that we have the example of Siddharshi Gani, who authored the beautiful, beautiful Granth Upmiti Bhav Prapanch Katha, uh, which I finally got into reading too. And oh, it's so brilliant. But this Mahatma at one point in time was so inclined towards studying the Buddhist faith, despite his Guru Bhagwan asking him not to, that when he went there, and I think we've discussed the story before, the Guru Bhagwan asked him to, return his garb when he goes there. But and so, when he went to study the Buddhist faith, he got so influenced, he came back to his Guru to, say that, oh, I'm leaving you and I'm taking Diksha there. And there was a lot of back and forth. And the legend says that he went back and forth 21 times, and after switching between the Buddhist and Jain faiths 21 times, the 21st time he comes to his Guru Bhagwan, his Guru Bhagwan says, his Guru Bhagwan knows from his very footsteps that this Jeev now has lost all faith and he's surely going to go there. And before the Shishya can say anything, also, at this point, it's so important to remember he hasn't interacted with the Shishya at all. Just by seeing his pace, right? Seeing the way he's placing his feet in the direction of the Guru Bhagwan, the way he's approaching the Guru Bhagwan. On just seeing that, Gita Guru Bhagwans are able to ascertain so much that he doesn't engage in any conversation. He simply says, "Vats, I'm going out for some work. I'll come back. In the meanwhile, I've left this Granth here. You can just, spend your time reading it." What he left was the Granth that we have referred to 100 times before, and that Granth is Haribhadra Sureshwari Maharaja's Lalit Vistara. And on reading that, all the preconceived notions that he has about the Jain faith and the nature of Ishwar Tattva, according to the Buddhist faith versus the Jain faith, all his delusions are dispelled. And by the time his Guru Bhagwan comes back, he he's already in tears, and he falls at the feet of the Guru Bhagwan, and he says that you have done the biggest upkar on me by showing the true path, and henceforth, I have no inclination of going there. Because also the Buddhist teacher there had told him, if you go to the Jain teacher again, ensure that you come back to give, my Buddhist garb back to me. So this time he decides, I'm not going back. Enough of this. And finally he sits down, and he carries further studies of the Agams. He himself becomes super Gitarth, and then he authors the brilliant Granth Upmati Prapanch Katha, which everyone should read. Acharya Bhavan Vijay Ramchandra Shri Maharaja had read that Granth 27 times in his entire life. Even though that Granth is super voluminous, it's a must read. Uh, Here, Upmati Bhav Prapanch Katha, Sudarshigani writes at one point in time that Haribhadra Sureshwarji Maharaja is my, is also my guru. For it appears that this Granth Lalit Vistara that he had written centuries ago was written only for me. And so we can also understand how even centuries later, it's impossible to tell which Granth of which Purvacharya will hit us. And by hit us, I mean hit the moha in us, and, uh, illuminate Samay Darshan within. So it's important to study everything, because every Granth is linked to the other. And the more Granths we study, the more Padarths will become clear to us. And in doing that, maybe there'll be those few Granths that really appeal to us. And by doing Swadhyay of those over and over, we'll also be able to attain the Parinati to, uh, you know, gather the strength, the virya to practice Bhav Charitra as shown in the 4th Sutra of Panchasutra, and then attain moksha, the Sarup of which is mentioned in the 5th Sutra. We'll end here for today. Sorry for the delay in beginning and also in ending. If there's any sorts of questions, please shoot them before we end. Pranam Madan bhai, yes.
What do you mean by Bhav Charitra?
So Bhav Charitra has multiple meanings, and the relevant meaning here, Bhav Charitra is Charitra which does not stay limited to practicing it outwardly in terms of, changing your clothes, your name, carrying the Rajor and Mohapati with you, but actually having the qualities that need to, be with you when you are at the 6th Gunasthanak. That is to have the required Sharpsham of, the required Sharpsham of your first 2 grades of Kashais, having and thus having a limitation in how much Rag and Vesh is present within you, having having the requisite knowledge that is required at least to be Jaganya Gitarth by the minimum standards, all of that. Essentially, Charitra which is supplemented by guns and not just outwardly. That is the isht meaning of Bhav Charitra here.
Yes, that is understood. Thank you, Parsha.
No worries. Are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll end for today. But before that, just a reminder, tomorrow is Shravan Bhagwan Mahavaswami Maharaja's Diksha Kalyanak. Please do not leave any stone unturned to celebrate it. We celebrate Paramatma's Janma Kalyanak with a lot of mirth, a lot of, grand celebrations. Let's try in our own individual capacities and also in our capacities as members of our respective sanghs to, sort of reinvigorate, revive the importance of these Kalyanaks. And we've said before how each Kalyanak is more important than the Kalyanaks that precede it. And thus, in that manner, the Diksha Kalyanak is more important of sorts than the Chavan and Janma Kalyanak. And for us, it is a greater alamban than ever. The Upadhyaya Yashasri Maharaja's Tavan again, he puts it so beautifully. Siha pare ekalo, dhira sai yamag rahi, ayu bahut tera varsha purna padi. Paramatma's lanchan was that of a lion, and just like a lion walks alone, unlike every other Tirthankar, unlike all the 23 other Tirthankar Bhagwans, Paramatma Mahavar Dev was the only Tirthankar Bhagwan who took Diksha alone, which the Shastrakar Bhagwans say symbolize the fact that henceforth there will only be a limited number of jeeves that will feel like getting out of the sansar and taking Diksha. And, which is that super important for us to remember that Bhagwan has prophesied this. At the same time, it is also important for us to remember that we have to be an exception to this prophecy, to draw a parallel. And we missed doing the second half of the Diwali discussion, unfortunately. So the first dream that Punyapal Raja had uh, on the night of Diwali, or the night before that, in fact, on the night of Chaturdashi, was that he dreamt 8 dreams, out of which the first one was that there is a herd of elephants, uh, and these are royal elephants, and they are in the Hasti Shala, the sort of shelter that is built for these elephants, and this shelter has become completely dilapidated. And because of this, this dilapidated structure, they are not chained in any sort, but they simply, even though they know that this structure is going to collapse, they do not feel like leaving the structure because they're too lazy to go elsewhere, or essentially to leave their so-called house. The interpretation of this was done by Paramatma, and Bhagwan said that this first dream, and remember, this is the first of the 8 dreams, it is directly applicable to Shravaks, and partly to Sadhu Bhagwans. It says that this dream of Punyapal Maharaja signified that henceforth, even though the quality of even materialistic pleasures in this sansar is going to degrade severely, Shravaks, even though they know that the sansar is bad, and like we saw, Dukh Swarup, Dukh Falak, Dukkhanu Bandhi, they will not feel like leaving the sansar. Just like these elephants do not feel like, leaving their Hasti Shala. Even though they know that everything is crumbling and everything is going to collapse very soon, all of their various aspects of life, they might be failing, or they might not, well, even if they're successful, the quality of success is going to be peanuts compared to what used to exist in Bhagwan's time. Even despite knowing all of that, they will not feel like leaving the sansar. And those who leave the sansar and take diksha will, a lot of them will come back in the sansar. Paramatma made this prediction very knowingly, and he knew that there are going to be exceptions to this as well. The idea is to be an exception and prove this prophecy wrong for us. So let's keep that in mind. And with that intention, let's celebrate Paramatma's Diksha Kalyanak. Once again, if you haven't had the time, please, get a copy of Sri Shashi Shalaka Purush Charitra from your Gyan Bhandar. Uh, or alternatively, we have the online copy. Please feel free to take a print and do Swadhyay of Paramatma's disposition pre-Diksha, and Paramatma's Diksha Kalyanak Rath Yatra, and Paramatma's Diksha, Paramatma's moment of Diksha. In fact, this is also very beautifully, so this Tavan that I shared yesterday from the puja, the sequel to this Tavan also beautifully covers, obviously very briefly, Paramatma's Diksha Kalyanak, and how the entire procession proceeds. The procession itself is very beautiful, and even when we look at that, we think the Rath Yatras that we carry out are really nothing that Indra Maharaja and also the folks of Kshatriya Kund Nagar did for what for Paramatma Mahavir Dev. Everyone, when Paramatma is leaving Kshatriya Kund Nagar, people are so confused that someone has some people have brought their cat along with them, thinking that they've brought their son or daughter with them, and they've left their child in the house, and they've carried something in place of something. They've been so disoriented because everyone is lost looking at Paramatma. When we look at Paramatma tomorrow and pray on the occasion of this Diksha Kalyanak, we can surely at least remember that the 3 Nisihis that we recite at 3 different intervals in the Derasar, at least during those 3 Nisihis, after reciting those 3 Nisihis, we take care to forget the rest of the sansar and look at Paramatma and Paramatma alone, at least tomorrow and perhaps tomorrow onward. And thereafter, when Paramatma's Diksha Rath Yatra comes to an end, and Paramatma comes to the Udyan outside of Brahman Kund, all of these sites are still present today in Bihar. And there, when Paramatma says Namo Siddhanam, he bows down to all Siddha Bhagwans of all 3 times, from in by way of Nam Sthapna, Dravya and Bhav, and in all their infinite forms. He's essentially reminding us, by way of reminding himself, that this is the aim that I had in mind at the time of taking Diksha. Whenever you take Diksha, or whenever you practice your Deshvarti Dharma Shravaks, have the same aim as mine, and that is to become one with the Siddha Bhagwans. In doing that, Paramatma bows down to the Siddha Bhagwans, and then finally Paramatma takes the Bhishma Pratigya of Karemi Samayam Savajam. Bhagwan does not say the word Bhante because Paramatma is Swayam Sambudh. He does not have any Guru Bhagwan uh, on his head because that is the conduct of Tirthankars, because they are the master of all three worlds. And that is when Paramatma says Karemi Samayam, and he resolves mentally as he's saying it, I henceforth renounce all Savadhya Yog by Manas and Kaya, and in terms of Karan, Karavan and Anumodan. At that point in time, imagine the bhav that Bhagwan must have said it with. Th- that Shubh bhav that Bhagwan had lifted him to such a high level on the seventh Gunasthanak, on the Apramatta, in the Apramatta Dasha, that at the very moment Paramatma takes this pratigya, Paramatma, who is now, up until this point, endowed with a very pure version of Mati, Shrut, and Avdhigyan, is now blessed with the fourth Manah Paryav Gyan. And at the very moment he takes Diksha, he is able to, start reading the minds of uh, all people. Read the, basically look at the Pudgal in everyone's everyone's Dravyaman, and predict what thoughts are going on with accuracy. So the bhav that Paramatma had, and we know, and we've seen this in the group earlier too, I think on the day of Gyan Pacham, that to attain Mana Paryav Gyan, you have to attain a really Vishuddha Bhumika in your Charitra, and only Sanyami Mahatmas can attain it. It is really mind-blowing to think that Paramatma attained it not on the day, but on the very moment of, at the very moment of taking Diksha. All of this for Paramatma is really Adbhut. Each Kalyanak in Bhagwan's life is Adbhut. And in a way, each Kalyanak is more important than the others. For instance, Chavan is the most important in one way, because if there weren't any Chavan Kalyanak, there wouldn't be any other Kalyanak. Nirvan Kalyanak is the most important because if there weren't the Nirvan Kalyanak, that Paramatma wouldn't have attained the state of perfection that we worship him in. If there weren't the Kevalan Kalyanak, we would not have attained the Marg. And similarly with every Kalyanak, you'll find this. Each Kalyanak is important in its own right. When I say this Kalyanak is the most important, please understand that I do not mean to put down the Janma Kalyanak or any other Kalyanaks, but simply the intention is to, bring to our minds the importance of that particular Kalyanak. And with all of this in mind, let's please also do the job of Paramatma's Diksha Kalyanak. We've shared the template of jobs for all Kalyanaks previously in the group. I don't remember when, but essentially, so the pad for tomorrow would be Om Reem Shri Mahavir Swami Nathaya Namaha. Nathaya Namaha is the pad that is associated with the Diksha Kalyanak. The reason behind this is that after Paramatma takes Diksha, Indra Maharaja and all other devtas, they see Paramatma he starts walking without even looking back at anyone. And then when Bhagwan has walked a considerable distance from the forest, from the garden where he's taken Diksha, all the devtas bow down, and they say that, oh Nath, we bow down to you. And thus the concept of saying so and so Paramatma Nathaya Namaha. Obviously this is also beautiful, very important. So certain things might not be covered in Sri Shashi Shilaka Purush Charitra, and these things are covered in Mahavir Charyu by Acharya Gunchandra Suri Maharaja. I have the Gujarati copy of that. If possible, please take a print of that and also read that for a beautiful description of Paramatma's Diksha Kalyanak. We can also remind ourselves of the heart wrenching stuti that Nandivardhan Maharaja did at that point in time. We all heard this stuti in the Kalpasutra Vyakhyans every Paryushan, when he says, I don't remember the stuti, but it begins with the pads Tvaya Vina Veera. Oh Veer, without you, how will we survive in this palace? This entire palace is always, lively and bright because of your presence. Now that you are not there, now that our parents aren't here, how will we, how will I continue to live the way I am living? And all of these Vinantis are also beautiful because on the one hand they show the the personal tie that they have with Bhagwan. On the other hand, they also show the samyak darshan that these Shravaks had. And let's also remember to visit Kshatriya Kund and Brahman Kund as early as we can, because this is it's the same area, those two sites. But these two sites are the sites of Bhagwan's Chavan Janma and Diksha Kalyanak. The Paramatma there is also beautiful, crafted by no one else but Bhagwan's own brother, Sri Nandivardhan Maharaja. And yeah, let's keep all of this in mind and ensure that this Diksha Kalyanak onwards, we also do a pranidhan, that until we are able to take Diksha, d- and take let's undertake some aradhana which could be prescriptive or negative, that is to undertake something or to get rid of something from our lives till we take Diksha. If I said anything that is contrary to Janagya or Michhami Dukadam, sorry for having taken 15 extra minutes now. And yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.